On behalf of the Atlantic Council and the Nuclear Energy and National Security Coalition, I am delighted to welcome you to today's webinar with Dr. Rita Baranwal, who is the Assistant Secretary for the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Nuclear Energy. We are here to discuss the report that was released just last week by the Department of Energy's Nuclear Fuel Working Group, Restoring America's Competitive Nuclear Energy Advantage. So let's get started. But first, Dr. Baranwal, welcome. And how are you? And can you tell us a little bit about how the work from home situation is going for you?
Good morning, Dr. Gordon. I am doing well given our circumstances. As we were just chatting, it's been 7 weeks almost in this mode. So we're into a groove, certainly. I have 3 others in my household that are relying on our bandwidth, if you will. And so fortunately, we have only had 2 days where our internet provider actually was down due to storms. And so all in all, it's been pretty good. And have tried to take up a few new skills. My family might comment not so successfully on the bread making front, but that's okay. It sounds like I have a couple more weeks to perfect that. So.
Great. And just for our audience, you are in Pittsburgh, is that correct?
Correct. I am coming to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today. Yes.
Okay, terrific. Well, welcome. So let's begin our conversation. The Nuclear Fuel Working Group report focuses on advances in nuclear fuel technology and exports. What recommendations does the report provide to boost U.S. export competitiveness? And what specific steps should be taken to implement those recommendations?
So the United States has the most innovative nuclear technology in the world. And unfortunately, we're losing our competitive global position as a world leader in nuclear energy to state-owned enterprises. There are other countries that are aggressively moving to surpass us. We do have a lot to offer, certainly, and we can be competitive. So the report outlines executive, congressional, and regulatory actions that could enhance the positive attributes of nuclear power, revive capabilities for uranium mining, milling, and conversion industries, strengthen U.S. nuclear technology supremacy, and also drive U.S. exports while assuring consistency with our United States non-proliferation objectives and supporting national security. I'm really excited about the recommendations that are made in this report, and I think it's going to provide us with the opportunity to regain our global leadership. Specifically, for those that may not have had the chance to go through the report just yet, the high priority recommendations suggested by the report include establishing a uranium reserve, support for private-public partnerships through the National Reactor Innovation Center, which is long for NRIC, support for the Versatile Test Reactor, VTR, and support for continued funding of advanced reactor concepts. And we've also begun to take some action on these recommendations already. For uranium, the President's fiscal year FY21 budget request includes $150 million to stand up a uranium reserve. And that will begin next year with the purchase of uranium from U.S. mines and of U.S. conversion services. With respect to the private-public partnerships that I mentioned, in 2018, the President signed the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act, which created NRIC, the National Reactor Innovation Center. NRIC is led by Idaho National Lab, and it accelerates the demonstration of advanced nuclear energy technologies by harnessing world-class capabilities of the National Lab System in DOE. And it does this by enabling testing and demonstration of reactor concepts proposed and partially funded by the private sector in partnership with our DOE national labs. NRIC also enhances these private-public partnerships by focusing on executing specific activities that include achieving demonstration and ultimately deployment of advanced technologies. The Nuclear Fuel Working Group report also highlights the vital importance of the Versatile Test Reactor, or VTR for short. The United States has identified the construction of VTR as a cornerstone for reviving and expanding our nuclear sector and is one of the highest priorities for the Department of Energy. And once it's completed in 2026, the VTR will support the development of advanced reactor technology and the continued operation of the existing fleet through accelerated testing of new fuels and materials and the development of advanced instrumentation and sensor type of systems. The report also recommends continued support for demonstration of U.S. advanced nuclear technology. My office has taken action on that by launching the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. This program focuses DOE and non-federal resources on the construction of demo reactors that are affordable to build and operate. And we've been moving very quickly to execute this program despite the telework status that we're in these days. We recently completed a request for information in February of this year, and we intend to release a request for proposals very, very shortly. So please stay tuned for that if you work for a company that, a company or an entity that might be interested in proposing. And our goal ultimately is to make awards by the end of this calendar year. I also want to note that we are in a really fortunate spot right now, wherein nuclear energy has strong bipartisan and bicameral support in Congress. And we will work together with the Hill to advance the report's recommendations that require specific authorization and additional appropriations.
So, Dr. Baranwal, you just mentioned a whole range which is terrific, but of different, what seems to me like different moving parts. So, talking about the importance of legislation and NEMA and NECA, and as well as pieces of legislation that are in the works but haven't been passed yet. Talking about the labs, your role at DOE, let alone we will touch on but haven't even mentioned yet the Export-Import Bank and the U.S. Development Finance Corporation. So, how do you get all of these different actors to all be on the same sheet of music, as it were, at the same time? And I know that the report mentions, it talks about this coordinator role, but can you address that a little bit and just getting everyone together and working, in a coherent manner to advance these recommendations?
So we haven't yet really fleshed out the coordinator role, so that is yet to come. But some of the things that I have heard when I was traveling, so pre-pandemic, when we were visiting with countries and talking about their needs for clean energy and their strong interest in either embarking on new nuclear energy systems or expanding their existing nuclear fleet, was that they want to know how to do business with the United States as a whole. And it wasn't very clear to many of these entities where do I start? And so my office has started to develop, we don't have a proper name for it right now, but we call it in-house a one-stop shop. And this is wherein a country that is interested in procuring United States clean nuclear technology for civilian use can come, and it sort of provides a roadmap for them and gives them guidance on the steps they need to take to navigate through what we call the interagency system in the US government. And so with that already started, we are, I think, a little bit ahead of what the report recommends, but certainly we don't have a proper a person or a position designated, but I think we're well on our way.
That's great. And it's wonderful to hear, that the recommendations are already, some of them being implemented, and that, some of these processes are already in motion. But initially, you mentioned this notion of the US having to compete with Russian and Chinese. Can we compete, and can we offer financing packages to third-party countries that will make them, want to work and be able to work with us?
So I certainly think we can compete. That's why we're out there. We not only have the best technology in the world, I think that is internationally recognized. The other two features that we offer that some other entities may not be able to offer is that we are in it not just as a transactional authority. We are in it for the what we hope to be a century-long relationship once we do go think, but also that there are many states within the country, as well as many countries around the world, that have set for themselves clean energy goals, clean energy standards, emissions targets, or zero, getting to either a net zero or near net zero carbon emission goals. And we have had this technology for decades that has not been emissions contributing, right? It's been emissions free. And we are at a time where we can start to leverage that feature as an asset. And so to me, being able to talk about nuclear energy technology in a way that is also beneficial to our environment, certainly provides electricity to us. As we sit here today, I'm able to come to you because of the electricity that I get from Beaver Valley Power Plant. And for those that unfortunately might have to be hospitalized, it provides electricity for those types of endeavors as well. These new reactors that we're working on range in coolant technology type, they range in size, and they range in the applications that they can be used for. And so to me, it's really exciting because we're offering many different options based on what the customer need is. So if you're a remote community, an islanded community, or a community that needs a large reactor for electricity or water desalination for that matter, we have the product that can suit your need.
I should mention as well that I'm also getting my electricity right now in Maryland from Calvert Cliffs. So
very good.
Also powered by nuclear. Something that's been on my mind a lot lately, and especially as we talk about the new advanced reactors, back in the early part of the decade, or the first decade of the century, so 2008, 2009, around that time, there was talk of a nuclear renaissance. And to my knowledge, the NRC even built extra buildings and extra space because they anticipated new reactors going through the licensing process, the review process. And we've seen a lot of that now. So there's this idea that, we're now on the verge of a nuclear renaissance, but some of the factors that cut that first renaissance off, extremely low natural gas prices, a world economic crisis, we're also seeing right now. So do you think that, it seems to me that we are now too far along with our current advances to, we can't stop. It has to keep going. But how do you see how do you see the nuclear community in the face of COVID-19, in the face of what's going on right now economically? And how can we keep making that argument, as you just did, for clean and reliable energy at this moment?
I think now more than ever, we should be making that argument and can make that argument. As we have been in this environment for the past several weeks, many of the plants across the country have gone through their scheduled refueling outages. And there was a question beforehand, should we postpone these outages? Can we postpone these outages? What's going to be the impact? And it was deemed that these power plants are critical infrastructure and the refueling outages should continue as planned. And certainly precautions were taken with respect to social distancing and all of those other aspects, and areas that certain processes could be delayed. They were, and they are being delayed. But the fact that our power plants are viewed as critical infrastructure, I think speaks really highly to what we contribute to society, not only in this type of, in a pandemic, but on a day-to-day basis. We quietly operate our facilities and provide electricity, but as I already mentioned, we can offer an alternative, a clean alternative to desalination as well for water, which is also really right now a worldwide crisis. We can also generate hydrogen and also offer process heat and district heating as well from these nuclear reactors. So I think what we really need to be doing, and what's serendipitous now, it's a silver lining, if you will, in this time of climate change, is that, again, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier, is we have a product that does not contribute emissions to the environment. And we need to be doing, I think, a better marketing job, if you will, on selling that asset, and that aspect of what we offer to society. And the time is right. The time is now. This is not something that we would have discussed, like you said. Even I remember specifically in about 2008, I was in a leadership course, and they, and it was with people from all different sectors, from the supermarket sector, from natural gas, certainly from nuclear energy, from banking, from medicine, and I was talking about what I did, and somebody had said, "Well, is that green?" And I said, "Yeah, it's green." And I kind of went into, the aspects of it. And she looked at me and she was very puzzled. And she said, "Well, why don't you talk about that more?" And that was when we, as long as you stayed out of the news, it was a good thing. And that has to change, and it's starting to change for us. And we really need to leverage that benefit of nuclear energy.
That's great. And I think it's actually your office that does the, I think it's a short movie or a video that says what the Simpsons got wrong about nuclear energy. And I'll back to that.
Yes, we have a really good comms team, and so please come take a look at our website if you haven't already. There's a lot of good features on it.
So to kind of get back to the report, to the Nuclear Fuel Working Group report, something that jumped out at me as I was looking through it was that you have very strong recommendations for domestic uranium sourcing. And the thing that I noticed was that last year, when the Atlantic Council published our task force report on revitalizing U.S. nuclear exports and U.S. leadership in this sphere, actually could not get our task force members to agree on domestic or, non-domestic sourced uranium. So this was something we actually ended up doing a call-out box that just really problematized this issue rather than coming down on it one way or the other. So how did your report reach this recommendation for domestic uranium sourcing with its strong emphasis on a U.S. uranium mining reserve?
So uranium production in the United States has been on a steady decline since the early 80s, I believe. And as U.S. nuclear utilities replace domestic uranium production with less expensive imports. As you mentioned, state-owned foreign competitors that operate in a very different economic and regulatory environment, they undercut U.S. prices, making it really nearly impossible for our U.S. producers to compete on a level playing field. As a result of that type of activity, almost 90% of the uranium fuel that's used today in our reactors in the United States is produced by foreign countries, pardon me. Our nuclear fuel production capabilities have also taken a severe hit. In 2019, so in 2019, the U.S. produced about 174,000 pounds of uranium, which is the lowest annual total in more than 70 years. And so as a result, there's only a handful of U.S. uranium properties that are now operating, and they're doing so at minimal levels just to keep facilities in working order. Given our current pandemic environment, that's not going in the direction of goodness at the moment either. So we've got other factors to worry about too. But there's many more that aren't operating at all, and they're waiting for market signals to resume production. So in addition to that, our nation, our only uranium conversion facility is also idle, and all of them are at risk of shutting down for good if our markets don't improve. So establishing a uranium reserve program is really what we need to do in this crucial time to de-risk our nuclear fuel supply. It will also create jobs that support our economy in the United States and strengthen the domestic mining and conversion services.
So let's keep going with kind of this notion of the back end of the cycle, because your report, again, it really deals with this in a way that, I don't know that I've seen dealt with so substantively, elsewhere. Can you just provide a little bit more insight into issues related to the recycling, reprocessing, and storage of spent fuel?
Sure. So the back end of the fuel cycle is actually being tackled through a separate line of effort, and that's outlined in the president's FY21 budget, and that includes a proposal for consolidated interim storage, a facility for consolidated interim storage. In February of this year, President Trump stated that Congress and previous administrations have long failed to find lasting solutions to the disposition of used nuclear fuel, which we know is currently stored at several sites across the country. And instead of continuing pursuit of stalled disposal of used fuel at Yucca Mountain in Nevada, President Trump committed to exploring innovative approaches to end the current stalemate on the disposition of commercial used nuclear fuel. So in keeping with the administration's direction, DOE will consider alternatives to permanent disposal of used nuclear fuel to the extent allowed by law and congressional appropriations. One such alternative is interim storage of used fuel at a consolidated location that is either government provided or privately owned. Our goal in the department is to advance the ability to provide for consolidated interim storage as part of an integrated waste management system. There's more that we need to do, and we recognize that full implementation of such a management system may require a change to existing law, and that this effort may need to be adjusted if new legislation needs to be enacted. So that's a bit on storage. On the recycling piece, it is an avenue that we are exploring at the moment. I do think that it is an option that we should learn more about, and I've got a team of folks that are looking into it as an additional option.
So, this also, I think, gets back to the issue that you raised earlier about fuel takeback, and that's, part of what countries may consider when they look at us, as a country from which they wish to import, or with which they wish to sign a nuclear agreement. How do we work with, and I know we've kind of been talking about U.S. exports as between the United States as the exporting country, and then between, a purchasing country. But let's talk a little bit about U.S. allies, and what role you see them playing, either in if there's a potential for co-financing or joint R&D, but kind of from start to finish. How do you see us working with allies in international nuclear cooperation?
I think that we are a very well-respected partner internationally, and we have several different areas where we are engaging internationally with those allies. One is IFNEC, another is NEA, but closer to home, there's also a lot of international interest in collaborating with us, for example, on projects like the Versatile Test Reactor. And so, to me, again, that speaks to the respect that our reputation has abroad, and not only with respect to the technology, but our regulatory standards and our high non-proliferation standards as well. And so, there certainly is a lot of promise in working with our allies. Going back to a question you asked earlier, it starts with having open, transparent, and candid conversations with those entities. We certainly have 1, 2, 3 agreements with many countries, but that sort of lays out the framework of what the expectations are in terms of collaboration. And there's a lot more interest now, especially that, as I mentioned, countries have clean energy standards that they're trying to meet in our technology. And so I think we're going to see a lot more collaboration with our allies, if you will, to ensure that countries that are interested in nuclear energy abide by the standards that are certainly laid out by IAEA and other organizations.
Sure. And then if we kind of imagine this world in which, we have a more robust nuclear export program, with additional countries, to what extent is the United States State Department then involved? And do our ambassadors become ambassadors as well for our U.S. nuclear export program? And is there a way to run almost an ambassador boot camp or something, to engage with them to make sure that, we're all on the same page?
So this starts to go back to your question about the senior level official that's mentioned in the report. But certainly we work within the interagency to ensure that U.S. companies are, if they apply for it's termed applying for advocacy. So if they apply for advocacy and the interagency groups agree to it, then we can advocate internationally for a particular company that has gone through that process in the U.S. government. It certainly does take a whole of government approach, and we do coordinate that not only within our side of the government, but also with industry. So I want to repeat that it's not just the technology that we're offering. It is the trustworthiness, the 100-year relationship that the countries will have with us. And the report recommends increasing efficiencies in the export process, as well as adopting 1, 2, 3 agreements to open new markets for exports of our technologies.
So, yeah, so I mean, again, I want to go back to this notion of the 100-year relationship. And we touched a little bit before, again, on capacity building, but, how do you ensure that, say, the grid in any given country, or even, a nuclear engineering or nuclear science, educational programs in a new to nuclear country? How do you go about building those things to make sure that relationship is going to work?
So in terms of infrastructure development, we do work with countries to provide training programs. We work with IAEA and several other entities as well, but to ensure that they have the talent pipeline, as well as the physical infrastructure that will be ready to welcome a nuclear power plant if their country has not had one before. And so there's a lot of infrastructure development that also we can assist with. In my travels around the world, when I do meet with university students, to me it's very, very heartwarming to see students that want to pursue a career in our industry. But it's heartbreaking that they can't find a job in their home country. The good news is they want to come to the United States to learn and to perhaps get an internship. And then once their home country does have a nuclear power plant, that they're able to go back home and use the experience that they've gotten here to go back and share that with their power plants once they are up and running in their home country. So that type of activity is really important for us to not only share our expectations, our safety culture that we have at our power plants, but then also to promulgate, if you will, all of that experience and knowledge and education to countries that are just embarking in this technology. Let me step back even before one gets into the workforce. There's a lot of work that DOE does with universities and academia, not only in terms of funding research and development, which I think many people are familiar with, but also providing fellowships and scholarships. We actually just recently awarded several $1 million in fellowships and scholarships. I'm really proud that we influence the workforce of tomorrow, and I hope that they join us in the workplace, in the next several years.
And this is actually something that we've dealt with, that the Atlantic Council has looked at, even just on the domestic side, with making sure that there are these university programs here in the United States for people to go into and become nuclear engineers. And then we've also looked at the relationship between the civil nuclear energy sector and the military, so, for example, the naval reactors, and kind of that going back and forth, making sure that there are jobs for Navy retirees at the end of their service, but then making sure that we have the universities to train them, prior to. So, I mean, all of these things I think are just so interconnected, which again, maybe just one coordinator isn't enough, but it just seems that there's this massive web, and if you kind of touch on one thing, you end up almost setting off a chain reaction. Not to get into science or anything. So we only have we don't have too much time left, and I know I said that I wasn't taking questions from the audience, but there was one question that kind of popped across my screen, which was, Dr. Baranwal, the art behind you, are those advanced reactor designs?
Well, whoever asked that, I want to thank you, because I've been video streaming from this office for the past 7 weeks, and no one has asked me about the art behind me. But I'm not sure if my answer is going to disappoint you or elate you. It's actually bacon, and it's a picture of bacon. And let me turn just to, the title of the paper is Bacon. It was written by my son several years ago, and my husband and I thought it was hilarious, and so it's been hanging in our office for many, many years. So that's Bacon, and then over here is a board game that I think it's made around the Great Pumpkin. So also artwork from my children. So I would love to see a bacon themed reactor, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Maybe one of these advanced reactor designs.
Someday.
Right. So to stay on this theme for our final question, and to end on a bit of a personal note, like many people, many of the people watching this right now, over the last several weeks, I have unexpectedly become somewhat of a homeschooler. So do you have any advice for those of us who are trying to maybe tell their kids a little bit about what we do, either on the nuclear engineering side, which I'm definitely not on, or on the nuclear policy side? What would you teach, or what would you tell this generation of school children about your work and about nuclear energy?
So thank you for the question, because I actually used a little bit of that yesterday. I woke up yesterday morning to a flurry of emails about the closure of Indian Point 2, and my kids were like, well, what's going on? Why are you upset at your phone? And I told them, and I said, this plant provides 25% of New York City's electricity. And while they're teenagers and they sort of get it, I said, can you imagine 1/4 of our house not having any electricity, right? And so, or having it only 75% of the time. We could barely get through one day without cable. Imagine if we didn't have electricity 1/4 of the time. And so when I distilled it down like that, they understood it. And I said, how awful would it be if you were the one room in 4 hospital rooms that didn't have electricity, right? You'd be dead. You would be dead. And so it's, that's a dire example, but it's sort of, for smaller children, it would be, okay, what if your video games only worked on Sundays? Or your refrigerator only worked on Wednesday and Thursday, or, it's, if you can put it into that type of term. What we've been doing a little bit more, because we have some free time, is working on puzzles and doing brain teasers. And there's Ken, it's a math kind of paper puzzle, a lot of Sudoku, things like that. And then also trying to bring out the Legos again, just so that we're kind of being creative, being a little bit creative. And all of those skills, I think, contribute to what is needed in this industry. If we really distill it down, it's STEM, it's STEM related activity, critical thinking, problem solving, and any of those types of activities, I think, are really meaningful. I know that I can tell you firsthand, I'm pretty sure my kids aren't sticking to the lesson plan that they're being given, because it's supposed to be a few hours of work a day, and it feels like some days they're only working for 30 minutes, perhaps. But it's okay. It's okay. We're in a pandemic, trying to go to school and trying to work. And so if you frame it like that, I think we'll be fine on the other side of this.
Great. Well, that's wise words for those of us who are here trying to work and teach our kids something all at the same time. So with that, Dr. Baranwal, thank you so much. Everyone, please go and read the report, the Nuclear Fuel Working Group report just published last week by DOE. And I want to thank our audience for tuning in from all across the world. And finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues, Emily Burlinghouse, Tom Knoll, and Jackson Siren. So thank you all again so much. And Dr. Baranwal, I hope to see you in person very soon.
Same here. Thank you.